Oh, friends, we are arriving at last at the climactic point of the Odyssey, aren't we? Book 23. And don't forget that in our terms, maybe the battle in the hall, in the way we consume culture, seems to be kind of the sort of climax. But actually, for Homer and for Odysseus, the climax of the story is not that really. It's coming back to Penelope, and book 23 brings us all of that. So, as an overview of what happens in book 23, at first, Penelope doesn't believe that Odysseus has returned. First 100 lines or so, she's kind of in denial. Now, we didn't know, we're not unsure whether what's happening here is Penelope's being cunning and she's testing, or whether she genuinely doesn't believe it. Because actually, when we get to line 111, we're going to see that Penelope is going to put Odysseus to the test in the test of the bed. And remember, there's the thing where she says to Eurycleia, "Can you move the bed and make it up with brightly coloured rugs?" And Odysseus is shocked by this, isn't he? He thinks that possibly this means the bed has been moved, and therefore something's gone wrong, because of course he made the bed out of a tree. That's the best picture I could get on the internet of a bed that is made out of a tree. Yeah, sorry about that. But anyway, he passes the test of the bed because he shows that he's understood the secret. Critical as well is the fact that if that's a secret, that the bed is made out of a tree, it must mean nobody else has been in her bedroom since he's been away. So it not only proves his identity, it also proves her faithfulness to him. It's a brilliant little way of doing that. And then thirdly, they tell their stories, and Athene holds back the night, doesn't she, so that they can tell their stories and then find love with one another again. So that's the overview of book 23. Penelope is the apex, which is the top point, the final bit of the Nostos. And it's fascinating, isn't it, that although he's come home and he's regained the kingdom and he's killed the suitors, that doesn't mean he's had his homecoming, has he? The Nostos isn't complete without Penelope, and you can see that all the way through the Odyssey. Look at these examples I just picked out across the text. I long to reach my home, he's weeping in Calypso's island. There is nothing better or finer when two people of one heart and mind keep house as man and wife. There's where the temptation of Nausicaa comes, but again he pushes that away because he wants the Nostos. May I find my wife and loved one safe and sound on my return home, in book 13. For whatever you think of Odysseus's behaviour with other women, etc., on his journey, he's still driven all the way through to return home and to return to Penelope. So Penelope is the focus for him. And it's really fascinating, I think, if you have a look at the simile in line 233 to 240. Homer plays with the audience here, and I'll just read this out, this simile. Her words stirred a great longing for tears in Odysseus' heart. She said she's recognised him. And he wept as he held his dear and loyal wife in his arms. It was like the moment when the blissful land is seen by struggling sailors, whose fine ship Poseidon has battered with wind and wave and smashed on the high seas. A few swim to safety to the mainland out of the foaming surf, their bodies caked with brine, and blissfully they tread on solid land, saved from disaster. Up to now, we've got a simile which is all about Odysseus' journey, isn't it? Poseidon has battered the ship, has destroyed it. You've struggled home onto land, covered in brine, just like in book 6 when Odysseus was coming out away from Calypso's island, saved from disaster. So it seems like the simile is about that great longing for tears in Odysseus' heart. He's got the relief of the fact that he's made it home. But actually, oh, Homer, you've only done it again, haven't you? Toying with us once again, because then he says in line 239, it was bliss like that for Penelope to see her husband once again. It's a shock, isn't it? It's actually not a simile about Odysseus at all. You think the struggling sailor coming to land is all about Odysseus, but actually it's about Penelope's degree or level of relief. So having had the whole story and followed Odysseus all the way through from book 1 to book 22, and we know what he's been through, we know how relieved you must feel if you have kind of finally got to that point. And actually, Homer then inverts everything, changes our expectations and tells us that this is actually the way Penelope feels when finally she's back with Odysseus. It's like she's been on that same journey. Brilliant. Oh, Homer, you genius. And then finally, the wise Penelope. Can we go as far as saying that Penelope is just a female Odysseus? Well, there's quite a bit to say about that, isn't there? That actually she loves tricks. She's been weaving the shroud to keep the suitors at bay. She's unpicked that shroud each night to make sure they can't be pressing her to make a decision about marriage. She's been weeping. She's used that as a tactic to drive the suitors back. She's even used the trick of the bed on Odysseus. In fact, we could argue that the bow in book 22 is a trick because she knows that only a true hero can actually pass that test, and she knows the suitors won't be able to do it. So she's very tricky, much like our polytropos Odysseus, the man of twists and turns. She's strong. She's held off the suitors for 3 years. She's endured all that time in the same way that Odysseus has endured the suffering of his journey. She's intelligent. I mean, when you look through book 23, look at the epithets: sensible Penelope, prudence Penelope, cautious Penelope, thoughtful Penelope, sagacious or Penelope. All of these things are about people who are careful, sensible, clever, thoughtful, intelligent. This is the nub of Penelope's personality. So those things are very similar to Odysseus as well, and are the sort of things that he's managed to do to get himself home. What we might like to say is she is the final point of Odysseus's Nostos. Whatever we think of Odysseus, he's been sleeping around a bit. He's been up to all kinds of funny tricks. She has been loyal, and she's been worth coming home for. And perhaps what we should just do right as we get to the end of the Odyssey is say, we've looked at this as the Odyssey about Odysseus, but actually, is it Penelope really who is the star of things? Is there more to her than just being a female Odysseus? Because actually she's been the one who's defined everything that Odysseus has been doing for all these years. There's an interesting book by Margaret Atwood, I think it is, called The Penelopiad. So it's a play on words with the Iliad, all about Penelope and rewriting the Odyssey from Penelope's perspective. And you might like to reflect on the whole story, but from Penelope's perspective, that although we've been following Odysseus in terms of the Homeric narrative, actually the focus has been Penelope. What a dramatic and unexpected thing to do, to place a woman at the center of things. You might think I'm overplaying it a bit, but I would argue that the Nostos and the story only really reaches its completion when Odysseus is back with Penelope, and his identity is only really shaped and restored when he's back as the husband of Penelope. Book 23, Homer, the Odyssey, it's all genius. And hopefully that can give you your notes for summarising book 23.